I can't wait to show you how to create solid embossing with the Curio. As you probably know, digital die cutters follow a path, and so writing or embossing follows the same path, creating outlines instead of solid areas. We use fills to try and work around that, but the results just aren't all that great, especially for those of us used to folder embossing with a Cuttlebug or Big Shot. Unlike other cutting machines, the Curio uses a geared, rigid base with mats and spacers held in position using posts molded into the plastic base. It turns out we can use this arrangement to our advantage since it gives us a way to precisely place our paths without registration marks or pick scan. This is going to allow us to use the Curio to emboss by tracing, similar to how we used to hand emboss with brass stencils, a stylus, and a light table back before the Cuttlebug became the embossing tool of choice. And we can also cut around our embossed design easily when we're done. We'll want to use a stencil-friendly design for our embossing to keep things as simple as possible for now. If you haven't designed one-piece stencils before, that means you need to pick out something that has no interior cuts like the triangle in an uppercase A. Fortunately, there are lots of stencil fonts and art available. Dingbat fonts from Have Fun with Fonts and Sassy Graphics are a great place to start. I'm on a bit of a seahorse kick, so I'll use one for the demo. This is the numeral 6 from HFF Aqua Stencil, Dingbat font. I would encourage you to start with something that isn't too detailed until you know how the process works at least. Lay out your design and size it how you want it on the page. We'll account for the mirroring inherent with embossing later. So I'm going to want this about 5 inches. And over on this side of the page because I'm going to make a card. For the sake of simplicity, set the stencil design to no fill and a red outline. This will eventually be our stencil cut line using the red tool holder. Next, we apply an internal offset to our design. It's important that your design is the final size before you do the offset because the offset needs to be 0.020 inches. And I'm going to group it. If we resize the design, the offset will resize too, which we don't want. I did a lot of testing to arrive at the 0.020 inch number, but there's a chance you might need to change that for different media or embossing tools. Let's set its line color to blue. This will be our embossing path using the blue tool holder. If you want to cut out your embossed image when you're done, go ahead and add your cut line. I'm going to make a card with this, but you could just add a shape or an offset or whatever. If you want to see how I designed this card outline, it's the same technique I used in my old stencil edge card video, which I'll link up on the blog. I use a green line for the cut outline to help me keep things straight. I've also added a blue embossing line for the fold. Now remember that we want a raised or embossed effect on our piece, but the Curio will actually be pressing into the back side of the page. This means the whole page will need to be mirrored to compensate. One easy way to do this is to draw a dummy shape across the whole width of the mat. Center the dummy shape to the page. Select your dummy shape and all of your design and flip horizontally. You should see your design mirror with respect to the vertical center of the mat. If not, undo and try again. If so, go ahead and delete your dummy shape and don't forget to save your design. From this point on, you don't want to move anything. In fact, if you have DE, you may want to lock the layers. I've tested quite a few different media for the embossing stencil. Silhouette chipboard gives a nice emboss and is easy to cut. Plastic poster board from Michaels gives the crispest emboss and is durable if you plan to reuse the stencil often, though not quite as easy to cut as the chipboard. So I recommend either of these, but this technique will actually work using any thick media that can be cut with a Curio. As for the media that gets embossed, I've had great results with 67-pound Neenah Vellum Bristol, so that's my top choice. But again, this will work for most cardstocks. I've cut and punched both the stencil media and the embossing media to fit the curio. This can be done by hand or with a Cameo. If you need help with this, my recent video on how to make your own curio mats has a lot of details. You need a good fit for the embossing process to work, so take your time to punch accurately. I like to prepare a stack of the Nina in advance. I can cut and punch 2 to 3 sheets at a time. So with the stencil media trimmed and punched to fit the posts on the platform, we arrange our stack to cut the stencil. I encourage you to test cuts with scraps of the same media in advance of this. Start with a lower pressure and blade depth than you think you need and work your way up so as not to damage your curio cutting mat. For the plastic poster board, I use two 2mm platforms, the curio mat, then the plastic poster board. Now for our cut settings. We want to go to Advanced. We want to be sure that our red color is checked and has a red circle beside it. As for the settings, I've made my own for the plastic poster board. Again, you want to test this for yourself, but I'm using the ratchet blade at 6, 5 platforms, speed of 3, thickness of 33, a double cut with overcut on at 0.1 millimeters at start and end. It's important that you load the platform into the curio correctly and verify that the carriage positions itself at the proper origin. Make sure you have a green light showing on the side of the machine. Double check that your blade is in the left-hand red holder. With everything checked and double checked, we're ready to send to Silhouette. Release the platform, remove the stencil and mat, then carefully remove the stencil from the mat and weed the stencil. Also be sure to clean off the mat. Next, we rebuild our stack to do the embossing step. Turn the curio mat face down, return the stencil, and stack your punched embossing media on top. Lock the clips again and load the platform into the machine. We'll go back to the cut by line color section again. This time we'll turn the red line off and the blue line on, because all we want to do in this next step is emboss. We want to verify that the blue circle is on and that only our blue lines are highlighted on the screen. For the blue cut, I'm going to use the Emboss Fine setting, but I'm going to also put it on to double cut. You also want to verify that the fine embossing tip, which is the one in the clear housing, is in the blue side or the right hand holder. Once all that is checked and double checked, we're ready to send to Silhouette. You'll want to watch because this is where the magic happens. If everything is set up correctly, the embossing tip will trace the inside of our stencil perfectly for a crisply debossed image. And it's nice and deep, so it still looks great when you flip it over. This is pretty cool, but we still aren't done. We rearrange the stack one more time to cut the card shape. To do this, we'll remove the stencil, flip the mat back over, reload the embossed piece like it was before, with the raised side facing down. When you're putting punch media on a sticky mat, it's easiest to load it onto the top 2 posts first, then work your way down. And don't lose your stencil. It can be used over and over as long as you keep the file unchanged. I like to write the file name on the stencil so I can find it easily when I want to come back to it. Now it's time for our last pass. We go back to our cut settings, uncheck the blue row, and check the green row. In this pass, we'll just be cutting cardstock, so whatever settings work best for your cardstock. For my Nina Exact Vellum Bristol 67 pound with this curio stack, I'm going to set my blade at 2 Remember to change your blade because we cut the stencil material last. I'm going to turn overcut on, set my pressure to 20 and my speed to 4. And by pressure I mean thickness. Now all that's left is to unload the platform, remove our embossed project, and admire it. Again, I'll be sharing this file so you can start with something that you know will work. Then you can move on to designing your own beautifully flat embossed pieces. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you aren't following my Clever Someday YouTube channel or my blog at cleversomeday.com, I'd sure appreciate it if you did. You can reach me using the comment form at cleversomeday.com. Thanks so much for watching.